Welcome to another installment of Donning the Armor. Now, for this morning, let's begin in Genesis chapter 4, verse 52. And it came to pass when Abraham's servant heard their words that he worshipped the Lord, bowing himself to the earth. So when he heard that they were willing to allow Rebekah to marry Isaac, he immediately began to worship the Lord, to thank the Lord for the blessings that he had bestowed upon him, not only by showing him the sign that he had asked for with the woman coming to give himself water and then water his camels, but also just for seeing every step he had taken bring him to this point and see him work out the goal he had been looking for, that he had been sent on, helping him and providing him with a path for success of the task that his master put him on. Then the servant brought out jewelry of silver, jewelry of gold, and clothing, and gave them to Rebekah. He also gave precious things to her brother and her mother. So he's giving her gifts, saying, "These are the things that I brought forth to give to you in honor of you marrying my master's son." And he and the men who were with him ate and drank and stayed all night. Then they arose in the morning, and he said, "Send me away to my master." Remember, he said he wouldn't sit and feast until he had the answer, until he told them exactly why he had come. With that worked out, with the success of his goal, now they sat and feasted. But her brother and her mother said, "Let the young woman stay with us a few days, at least 10. After that she may go." So, them seeing the riches coming from this servant, they seemingly were trying to milk some more out of him. They wanted more. They wanted to see if he stayed, how much more would it enrich them to have him stay and linger and hold on to Rebekah. That way he would feel more and more anxious to almost up the price, as it were, to give them. And he said to them, "Do not hinder me, since the Lord has prospered my way. Send me away so that I may go to my master." So they said, "We will call the young woman and ask her personally." Remember, they've already agreed to let her marry Isaac. And that's the way marriages were done back then. They were arranged. Normally, a young man would see a woman that he wanted to marry, and he would have his father go to their father and work out a dowry. Well, they've already done that. They've already accepted the gifts. And now they're saying, hold on, don't go. You say, "No, let me go. The Lord prospered my way. You agreed. I've fulfilled my goal. Let me go back to my master," and say, "Well, let us ask the girl. Let us ask the young woman and ask her personally," as a way to once again stall him there in looking to enrich themselves. And we can say that pretty confidently because we'll become quite accustomed to seeing Laban doing this later on in Genesis. Then they called Rebekah and said to her, "Will you go with this man?" And she said, "I will go." So she confirmed it. She said, "Yes, I will definitely go to meet the young man with which this servant came to marry me." So they sent away Rebekah, their sister, and her nurse, and Abraham's servant with his men. And they blessed Rebekah and said to her, "Our sister, may you become the mother of thousands of 10,000s, and may your descendants possess the gates of those who hate them." This, in a way, mirrors the blessings that God poured out on Sarah, saying that she would be the mother of many nations. But this is also a pretty common cultural thing at the time of blessing the daughter to go forth and be prosperous, to multiply, to have a great family, and for them to grow up in a way of prosperity and wealth and power themselves. Then Rebekah and her maids arose, and they rode on the camels and followed the man. So the servant took Rebekah and departed. Now Isaac came from the way of Beer Lahai Roi, for he dwelt in the south. So now he's coming up. And Isaac went out to meditate the field in the evening, or meditate in the field in the evening. And he lifted his eyes and looked, and there the camels were coming. So Isaac is coming up from Beer Lahai Roi, and he's going out to meditate, probably to pray to God, to be alone, as we see throughout the scripture, especially in the New Testament with Jesus. People going out by themselves to commune with God. Meditation has a lot of meanings nowadays. Normally it comes from Eastern philosophy when we think of meditation. The idea of clearing your mind of all thoughts and opening yourself up to the world. Well, in the Bible, in Christianity, and in Judaism, to meditate is to fill your mind with the Word of God. Fill your mind with the presence of God and pray to Him. And meditate on His Word and on His will. It's meditation itself is similar, but we don't, as Christians, empty our mind. We fill it with God. But as he's out there, he sees the camels coming. Then Rebecca lifted her eyes, and when she saw Isaac, she dismounted from her camel. For she had said to the servant, "Who is this man walking in the field to meet us?" So she gets off the camel and said, because she had said, "Who is this man?" And the servant said, "It is my master." So she took a veil and covered herself. Very common that, the groom shouldn't see the bride's face. So she covers herself with a veil. But she wanted to dismount. She wanted to see the man who she was marrying. And the servant told Isaac all the things that he had done. So he goes through the entire story again. Then Isaac brought her into his mother Sarah's tent, and he took Rebekah, and she became his wife, and he loved her. So Isaac was comforted after his mother's death. So he took her into her mother's tent. Basically, he, without his mother being there to bless their union, he publicly, in front of his people, Abraham's people, they go into his mother's tent as a public proclamation that we are to be one. We are to be a couple now. We are to be of one flesh, as we are told to be. Not as it gets so perverted through the Old Testament with David taking so many wives. Solomon, that's a whole nother story altogether. But, even we see Abraham in the very next verse, we'll see again, he took yet another concubine. So we'll see that, but really we are meant to be one man and one woman, one flesh, to be complete, as it said in Genesis 2. That's what we're to be. So let's go down to Genesis chapter 25 and start in verse 1. Abraham again took a wife, and her name was Keturah, and she bore him Zimran, Jokshan, Medan, Median, Ishbak, and Shua. So we don't know this is when this happens. It doesn't exactly. Once again, we're being given a chapter that fills in the backstory of Abraham, not exactly going sequentially through when he took this concubine. It wasn't necessarily right after Isaac and Rebekah were married. It could have been a different period of time, but this is once again laying out descendants of Abraham through this concubine, Keturah. Jokshan begot Sheba and Dedan, and the sons of Dedan were Asherim, Lethsharim, and Lemorim, and the sons of Midian were Ephah, Epher, Hekok, Ebedah, Eladah. All these were the children of Keturah. And Abraham gave all that he had to Isaac. But Abraham gave gifts to the sons of the concubines which Abraham had, and while he was still living, he sent them eastward, away from Isaac his son, to the country of the east. So this is giving all of the descendants of Abraham who he had through his concubines. But it's laying out the fact that he gave all he had. The birthright of everything went to Isaac and Isaac alone. And much like he did with Ishmael, these sons of the concubines would not be his heir because he sent them eastward to go live somewhere else. He gave them gifts, he blessed them, but his heir was solely going to be Isaac. This is the sum of the years of Abraham's life which he lived, 175 years. Then Abraham breathed his last and died in a good old age, an old man and full of years, and was gathered to his people. So he was taken back and gathered to his people. He would go to Sheol. He would go to the place of the dead, as the Jews believed. And he would go to be buried literally in the same tomb that he purchased for Sarah. And his sons Isaac and Ishmael buried him in the cave of Machpelah, which was before Mamre, in the field of Ephron, the son of Zohar the Hittite, the field which Abraham purchased from the sons of Heth. There Abraham was buried, and Sarah his wife. And it came to pass after the death of Abraham that the Lord blessed, that God blessed his son Isaac. And Isaac dwelt at Beer-lahai-roi. I know I pronounce that different every time, but I am not the greatest at these names, so forgive me of that. Now this is the genealogy of Ishmael, Abraham's son, whom Hagar the Egyptian, Sarah's maidservant, bore to Abraham. But it is nice to see that Ishmael, even though he was sent away, he did come back to bury Abraham as his son. And it's wonderful to see that, I guess, as I continue to get older and I have children of my own, that we do grow detached from our family as we grow older. We spend so little time with them. When we're little, we spend all of our time with our parents. Lots of times, if we live near them, we'll spend a good amount of time with our grandparents. But as we get older, it becomes days of our life if we add all the minutes and hours together. And it's good to see that at this time, that even though Abraham has passed, that Ishmael still came back to bury his father. And these were the names of the sons of Ishmael, by their names according to their generations. The firstborn of Ishmael, Nebajoth, then Kedar, Adbeel, Mibsam, Mishma, Duma, Massa, Hadar, Tema, Jetor, Naphish, Kedemah. These were the sons of Ishmael, and these were their names by their towns and their settlements, 12 princes according to their nations. These were the years in the life of Ishmael, 137 years, and he breathed his last and died and was gathered to his people. They dwelt from Havilah as far as Shur, which is east of Egypt as you go towards Assyria. That note is added in, obviously, to let the people of Moses' time and Joshua's time have an idea of where these people that lived hundreds of years before them actually came from and where they dwelt. He died in the presence of all his brethren. And as God promised, he would be the father of princes. And you see the 12 princes based by their nations and where they were, how they lived. This is the genealogy of Isaac, Abraham's son. Abraham begot Isaac. Isaac was 40 years old when he took Rebekah as his wife, the daughter of Bethuel, the Syrian of Paddan Aram, the sister of Laban the Syrian. Now, as I mentioned before, people try to make Rebekah out to be 3. There was an age gap, let's be honest. Isaac was 40, Rebekah is probably 16 to 20, because Israeli women at that time, Israelite women, lots of times got married around 18, 16, 18 years old. So yeah, there's a healthy age gap there. But that was very common practice because typically the man would be successful and have something to offer the father of the wife. You know, in our days now, we kind of have that romanticized penniless marriage. I know I kind of had my own, but where you just love each other and you want to be married and you have nothing to offer except for love and companionship. Well, back then it didn't quite work that way. And that led to age gaps. And age gaps of that nature between adults, not exactly the biggest deal back then. Nowadays, there's a little bit of a generational gap when it comes to knowledge and attitude and the way they view the world. So age gaps come into a little bit more of a conflicting issue. But it's not the age that's the problem when you're talking about grown people. Now Isaac pleaded with the Lord for his wife because she was barren, and the Lord granted his plea. And Rebekah his wife conceived. But the children struggled together within her. And she said, "If all is well, why am I like this?" She went to inquire of the Lord. So as we see quite often, the mothers of the people of Israel, it's a struggle, and it is a struggle in my mind because God wants his people to know his hand in his work in every aspect of their lives and history. He wants them to know that it was through him that these things occurred. So Sarah couldn't naturally have children until the Lord allowed it. Rebekah struggles to have children. She's barren until the Lord allowed it. Elizabeth later with John the Baptist. You have Rachel who couldn't have children for so long. And that is the way of the Lord. He wants Gideon to go into battle against tens of thousands, if not 100,000 people with 300 people, because he wants his people to know it is through him and him alone for which blessings come, and through which their history and their success has always come. But we see this affected Rebekah as well. So she wants to go and say, "Hey, I don't feel well. Is all okay, Lord?" And the Lord said to her, "Two nations are in your womb. Two people shall be separated from your body. One people shall be stronger than the other, and the older shall serve the younger." So when her days were fulfilled for her to give birth, indeed there were twins in her womb. And we see this often where the blessing goes to the younger more than the older. Ishmael, older of Abraham's children, Isaac the younger. The blessing went to Isaac. Abraham wasn't the oldest brother. Then we'll see Jacob and even Joseph in a way. The Messiah comes from the line of Judah. Reuben was the firstborn. So we see this again and again where the Lord takes the younger, the weaker, the meeker of the sons and makes him the one through the covenant that the covenant was born through. David the youngest of 7 sons, I believe. Always the younger, always the one you would not expect. And the first came out red. He was like a hairy garment all over, so they called his name Esau. Esau, literally, they saw he was hairy. I can feel his pain with that one. And Esau, basically, they named him Hairy. I mean, that's what they named him. So afterward, his brother came out, and his hand took hold of Esau's heel. So his name was called Jacob. Jacob is heel snatcher, which goes through his entire life until he's renamed. We see this is that he is constantly tripping up his brother Esau. Isaac was 60 years old when she bore them. So as you can see, if you kind of do a little bit of math, it took them about 20 years to have a child, to have these 2 children, to have twins, which would make Rebekah almost 40 years old by the time she had twins, which not exactly a Sarah situation. But when you're starting to get that old and you're trying to have children, it can start to wear on a woman. So you can see why it made her anxious. So the boys grew, and Esau was a skillful hunter, a man of the field, but Jacob was a mild man dwelling in tents. And Isaac loved Esau because he ate of his game, but Rebekah loved Jacob. So, I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. Esau was the more manly man. Jacob was more mild. He liked to learn. He was more domesticated, if you would say. I mean, Esau was a wild man. Jacob was more domesticated, so you can understand why Rebekah might have loved him more. He probably looked up to her more. He probably spent more time around her. Where Isaac, was like Esau and really loved to enjoy what was in front of him. He loved the food. He loved the outdoors. Now Jacob cooked a stew, and Esau came in from the field, and he was weary. And Esau said to Jacob, "Please feed me with that same red stew, for I am weary." Therefore his name was called Edom. Edom is red. That's why the people he would birth, the nation would be the Edomites. But Jacob said, "Sell me your birthright as of this day." Once again, heel snatcher trying to trip up his brother. And Esau said, "Look, I'm about to die. What is this birthright to me?" So Esau's saying, "What do I care? I'm about to die of hunger. Like, what's the birthright going to do me if I die now?" And of course, he's being hyperbolic and he's being dramatic. But this is the way Esau viewed the birthright and the blessings of God, is he only looked at what was in front of him. He had tunnel vision. He cared only for what was in front of him and didn't look at the long game. Then Jacob said, "Swear to me as of this day." So he swore to him and sold his birthright to Jacob. And Jacob gave Esau bread and stew of lentils. Then he ate and drank, arose and went his way. Thus Esau despised his birthright. Esau could not care any less about his birthright. He lived for himself, for the way he wanted to live. He was a wild man. He was a man of the land. He didn't take the blessings and birthright seriously. It didn't matter to him like it should have. So, chapter 26. There was a famine in the land, besides the first famine that was in the days of Abraham. And Isaac went to Abimelech, the king of the Philistines, in Gerar. Then the Lord appeared to him and said, "Do not go down to Egypt. Live in the land of which I shall tell you. Dwell in this land, and I will be with you and bless you. For to you and your descendants I give all these lands, and I will perform the oath which I swore to Abraham your father. And I will make your descendants multiply as the stars of the heavens. I will give to your descendants all these lands, and in your seed all the nations of the earth shall be blessed. Because Abraham obeyed my voice and kept my charge, my commandments, my statutes, and my laws." Remember, back then, without the covenant of grace, they worked off a covenant of, even though the law had not been given, it was a pre-law. Abraham's righteousness was accounted to him by his trust in all that the Lord told him and carrying out and proving that he trusted in the Lord. So the Lord's saying to Isaac, "I have the same commandment with you, or covenant with you, to follow my commandments the same way, to do all that you can, and to live in the same way your father did, trusting in me for your provision." So Isaac dwelt in Gerar, and the men of the place asked about his wife, and he said, "She is my sister." For he was afraid to say, "She is my wife," because he thought, lest the men of the place kill me for Rebekah, because she is beautiful to behold. So, just like his father, he lies. But where his father Abraham was technically correct in that Sarah was his half-sister, Isaac and Rebekah are not even that related. She'd be more like a second cousin. You know, they are not brother and sister. And here he lies in a way that his father did not. Now it came to pass when he had been there a long time that Abimelech, king of the Philistines, looked through a window and saw there was Isaac showing endearment to Rebekah his wife. Then Abimelech called Isaac and said, "Quite obviously she is your wife. How could you say she is my sister?" Abimelech has been through this before with his father. So he's saying, "Look, I saw you. Why are you doing this?" Isaac said to him, "Because I said, lest I die on account of her." And Abimelech said, "What is this you have done to us? One of my people might soon have lain with your wife, and you would have brought guilt on us." Remember, he learned from what happened when he was with Abraham. So he's saying, we heard from your God before. Like, if one of us had touched his wife, we would have brought curses down upon us, and the same thing would have happened with yours. Like, why are you doing this to us? So Abimelech charged all his people, saying, "He who touches this man or his wife shall surely be put to death." He's not playing around this time. I think he's just had enough of the seed of Abraham at this point. Then Isaac sowed in that land and reaped in the same year 100-fold, and the Lord blessed him. The man began to prosper and continued prospering until he became very prosperous, for he had possessions of flocks and possessions of herds and a great number of servants. So the Philistines envied him. Now the Philistines had stopped up all the wells which his father's servants had dug in the days of Abraham his father, and they filled them with earth. And Abimelech said to Isaac, "Go away from us, for you are much mightier than we." So we're going to stop there now. But once again, like Abraham, Isaac is being blessed in absolute abundance for his loyalty and obedience to the Lord. In every way, he is being obedient. He is following through on everything God asks of him. And because of that, you can see the Philistines are starting to envy him. They're starting to not like it. Didn't help that he lied to him either, because I'm sure that angered them as well. But now you have them seeing how prosperous he's becoming and how mighty he is, because when you start multiplying all these possessions of herds, all these flocks, so goes his servants. And if we remember, Abraham had so much, he basically had his own private army. So the Philistines are saying, look, you need to go now, because you're starting to become stronger than us. And we don't want any conflict from you. And we're afraid that it might come to that, especially when they're stopping up wells that he's starting to use. But for now, thank you for joining me for another installment of Donning the Armor. I hope to see you again for the next one. But until then, be blessed.